Foreign Minister, thank you for joining CNBC. I'd just like to kick off by asking you to give us a sense of where you see Ukraine positioned today. We have pro-Russian troops 50 yards from your border. How worried are you that we could see an incursion before Christmas?
We have Russian troops along our border. We have them in our occupied territories of Crimea and Donbass. And according to our estimates and estimates of our partners and our position, they concur, Russia already has the capacity to conduct offensive operations in the region. At the same time, we see that they are continuing to build up their forces. So Putin has not decided yet whether to do a military operation. But if he decides to do so, things will be happening in a blink of an eye.
Do you feel that Ukraine is well positioned to withstand an invasion?
Well, we were attacked by Russia in 2014 at the lowest point of our strength. And Putin had an ambitious plan to cut Ukraine in half and set up a proxy state called New Russia. But he failed. He failed because of three factors: the Ukrainian army, the people of Ukraine, and Ukrainian partners on international arena. So we still have all these three elements in place, but all three of them are much stronger than they used to be in 2014. So I'm pretty certain that we will be fighting, and in the end we will prevail.
He's been doing a lot of work since then, particularly in the Donbass region. When you take a step back and think about this with regards to your allies here in Europe, in the United States, are they doing enough to protect Ukraine's sovereignty?
Well, as long as Russian troops stay in Crimea and in Donbass, none of us is doing enough, really. We can only judge by the final outcome, and that final outcome should be the withdrawal of Russia from Ukraine. However, things would have been much worse if we did not have these relations with our partners, and if our partners did not evolve kind of their attitude towards Russia, because we do recall 2014, it was very difficult to convince the world, including Washington, by the way, that Ukraine deserves full-fledged support in its fight, that Ukraine deserves military supplies, that we are standing there for a good cause of democracy, of the right of the people to choose their own destiny.
So President Biden has said, at least so far, that he has no plans to put American troops in Ukraine. Do you believe that you need U.S. troops on your soil?
I have full trust in the Ukrainian army, but I also do have full trust in the U.S. intelligence and military technologies.
Does that mean yes?
No, this means that our soldiers have been fighting this war for 8 years.
So you don't need U.S. troops, is what you're saying?
No, we are fine with the fact that we are fighting for our land.
Yeah.
And we know how to do it. But of course, if we have state-of-the-art American weapons, military technologies, if the U.S. is sharing intelligence with us, that saves lives of Ukrainian soldiers, and that makes our fight easier.
Yeah, there was a suggestion that weapons were being held up for NATO forces to Ukraine. Has that been resolved?
Well, these rumors pop up from time to time, but I would like to recall that just recently the United States completed the dispatch of the latest package of military support. This package was offered by President Biden to President Zelensky during their visit in Washington.
So defensive weapons like drones, these things are on their way?
Things are coming. However, we always call on partners, including the United States, not to condition the supply of weapons or any military equipment, because army is a big thing. It's not only about gun machines, it's also about radio jamming, it's also about anti-drone technologies, these kind of things. So we call on partners never to condition the supply of military equipment to Ukraine with the behavior of Russia. Because we do not, it will be a big mistake to say, if Russia attacks, we will give Ukraine more weapons. No, it will be too late. The best way to make Russia not attack Ukraine is to give us weapons now, because Russia will think 3 times and will count very diligently every potential killed Russian soldier.
Now, beyond a military deterrent, there are, of course, sanctions. We're talking about an economic slap, if you will. It's been used before with President Putin. And essentially, we've seen the Russian president moving beyond those economic sanctions. Are you confident that the West, the United States, and the EU have a package of sanctions ready to go if they need to that will actually deter President Putin from invading Ukraine?
Well, in 2014, 300 innocent lives had to be paid to make the European Union slam economic sanctions on Russia. And those lives were the lives of the passengers of MH17 flight downed by a Russian missile.
Yeah.
This number does not include hundreds of killed Ukrainian citizens. They had been already killed by that time, but the European Union was still deliberating on whether economic sanctions were sufficient. So the message I'm sending now to my colleagues
is don't dither. 100,000 troops on the border. You can't wait.
That's exactly the point. You cannot allow another bloodshed. This will be a catastrophe. We will be fighting, but you will have to slam sanctions anyway.
So sanctions now ahead of
the difference is
incursion.
if you at least set up or pull together a serious package of sanctions and let Russia know that this is what's going to happen,
right,
then that will deter Russia.
And what are we talking about? Because in the past, when I've spoken to those on the ground in Russia, they've essentially said, until you start slapping sanctions on the bank, we're talking Sberbank and others, you're really not going to get at the heart of Putin's apparatus.
Well, at this point, our partners maintain the constructive ambiguity approach. They say that consequences for Russia will be severe, unprecedented, and so far and so on. But they don't go into details. And I do not know the entire package that is being discussed about between the United States and its European allies.
Are we talking about barring them from the Swiss system?
But yes, we are talking about things as far as we understand, like more economic restrictions on trade and investments in Russia, restrictions on sovereign debt of Russia, restrictions on bank activities, and of course the nuclear option that causes the biggest debate is the disconnection of Russia from SWIFT. We hear from different corners that this issue is being raised. But again, I would like to make clear that I'm not aware of the entire package of potential sanctions that is being discussed between the United States and its allies. This is their internal affairs. We're doing our job, they're doing theirs.
Well, since 2014, of course, Russia has been slapped with economic sanctions. And in my conversations, not just with their central bank governor, but also with President Putin himself, I've asked the question again and again, as they move away from dollar-denominated reserves into euros and elsewhere, even looking toward a digital ruble, how effective are those economic sanctions actually at this point? Would you say that the economic sanctions that are currently in place aren't enough?
Economic sanctions slammed on Russia in 2014 did help to stop Russia, to contain Russia, I would put it this way. They were efficient. Did Russia learn how to live with the existing sanctions? Yes, they did.
Does it concern you that a digital ruble on down the line could make them even more immune?
Well, of course, they are doing their part of the job, and they are coming up with solutions to avoid sanctions or to mitigate the negative impact of sanctions. This is life. That's why I'm saying that by now Russia learned how to live with the current sanctions, and we need additional pressure to change Russia's behavior.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the energy dynamic of all of this. A couple of months ago, I was in Moscow, and I had the opportunity to ask President Putin directly if he's using energy as a weapon when it comes to the gas crisis in Europe, and also, of course, with what's happening with Ukraine. Do you believe that President Putin is using energy as a weapon?
I have facts. I think all citizens and traders in the European Union understand that he's doing that because they have to pay much higher prices for gas, not only in Ukraine, but also in the European Union. And basically what President Putin said by this handmade crisis is that certify Nordstrom II and gas prices will be back to normal. As long as you are opposing this, you will continue to experience problems. isn't it a use of gas as a weapon? Is it a blackmail? Yes, it is.
Does this all go back to the very beginning of Nord Stream 2 in a sense? And when you think about this with Angela Merkel and President Putin making that agreement, essentially saying that as part of the Nord Stream 2 agreement, Russian gas would continue to flow through Ukraine's pipeline. Do you think in retrospect that Nord Stream 2 was a mistake? Because essentially it's allowed President Putin to hold Europe, in a sense, hostage.
Nord Stream 2 is has neither commercial nor moral grounds. And these are two important elements. Nord Stream 2 is a political project that benefits Russia and goes against the basic principle of EU energy policy, which is diversification.
Yeah. When you think about that, though, with regards to the outgoing Chancellor of Germany, do you believe the new government will be more amenable to your concerns? Because essentially they've said if there's an invasion, they're not going to allow Nord Stream 2 to operate.
Well, I had a contact with new German foreign minister. It was encouraging. My president met...
What does encouraging look like? Because at the end of the day, this is good for Germany, right?
Well, with Germany is a big country. It has connections with Ukraine. We have a lot in common, some tragic, but also some very good pages in our history. So this is a special relationship. And we heard what the new foreign minister of Germany said about Nord Stream 2. We both agreed in our conversation that the EU's third energy package should be applied to this project in its letter and spirit. So we're just building, we're just starting a new relationship. This is a complete change of a system for German government.
A changing of the guard.
Yes, yes. So we are, I hope, as the famous movie said, you know, this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship. But we are ready for any scenario. And my president met yesterday with the new chancellor. This was their first touch. And I think we have to talk a lot with them so that they understand Ukraine very well and understand the consequences of any appeasement of Russia, strategic consequences of any appeasement of Russia. Because if Europeans and Americans allow Russia to turn Ukraine into a mess, the strategic consequences of that will be felt beyond Ukraine. They will be felt in EU countries, including Germany. They will be felt in Far East Asia.
Well, they're already feeling the strategic consequences given the gas crisis.
Exactly, exactly. That's what we are saying. So
when it hits people's pocketbooks, often they stop and pause.
Yeah, those who tell us we have to do a smart policy towards Russia, we agree, actually. You have to be smart, but you have to be strong. If you choose the path of appeasing Russia, of making concessions to Russia, and this crazy logic of some partners that whatever Russia does, Ukraine has to do another step towards Russia to show its constructiveness. The question is, how many steps do we have to make? I mean, how many concessions do we have to make Russia?
Well, one concession President Putin has said, other than the fact that he does want urgent talks on this situation, is that if NATO would agree not to move closer to the borders of Russia and include more countries, if Ukraine would agree not to attempt to become a part of NATO, then he'd back off. Is that something that you'd be amenable to?
Well,
just to keep the peace.
May I remind your viewers that in 2014, Ukraine, according to the law, was a non-bloc country. The integration of Ukraine to NATO did not exist as a policy. And what? Did it help us to prevent Russia from illegally annexing Crimea, from waging a war in Donbass and killing 14,000 Ukrainians? No, it didn't. Did neutrality help Moldova to reunify and to bring Transnistria region, which is being under effective control of Russia, back into Moldova? No, it didn't. So those who are buying into the argument of Putin that, okay, we have to put the Ukraine's NATO integration on hold and everything will be fine,
Yeah.
they are either Putin's Muppets or they are doing a wrong job. They have to move away from politics.
Okay, so it's hard to get away from politics, obviously, but when you think about that with regard to Ukraine specifically, does Ukraine need to be a part of NATO, in your view, to remain a sovereign state at this point? Does it need that NATO support as a member?
If Ukraine had been a member of NATO in 2014, you and I would have had a different conversation now.
Yeah.
There would be no war, no destruction, no MH17. Putin would be minding his business.
But would he?
Not allowing...
He considers Ukraine to be the heart of old Russia.
That's, that's his own problem. He can live in his own theories and myth. That's fine. But he would, my point is that he would not dare to attack militarily a NATO member, and that's the fact. We would have saved thousands of lives, and we would have saved a lot of stability, if I may put it this way, in Europe.
Bringing it back to the gas crisis before I let you go, I just want to ask, in your view, taking the long view, given highest gas prices on record that we've seen, cold winter coming, a huge part of this gas crisis obviously has been the fact or the failure of Russia to put adequate supplies in the pipeline for a concerted amount of time. They tell me they have reasons for the fact that they haven't done that. Does the gas crisis, in your view, benefit Ukraine because it really shines a light on the fact that Europe and Germany, via Nordstrom II, has maybe put themselves in the pocket of Mr. Putin?
Well, you know, in our view, Putin did enough to shine a light of what he really is and what Russia's goals are. So no, we are not happy with the current gas crisis. I want to make clear, Ukraine is not happy about war, about fighting a war, about feeling insecure, about talking with partners on how they can help us. We want to help others. You know, we want to change the paradigm. So we are not happy that finally they see how mean the Russian leadership is. We want to live a normal life and decide what we want to do. Second, we are not benefiting from this gas war because it puts high gas prices, put enormous pressure on our economy.
Yeah.
And we are not EU member, we are not subsidized, we're not receiving any structural funds to mitigate economic consequences. So we are suffering from this crisis probably even more than EU countries.
Yeah.
The problem is this: Ukraine has always been a reliable transit country for Russian gas. And the only reason why Putin decided to bypass Ukraine is to deprive Ukraine of this asset and of this security guarantee.
Now, Mr. Putin has pushed back on this, particularly with me a couple of months ago. I asked him the same question. We know the outgoing Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, had suggested that she wanted the commitments that went alongside Nordstrom II, which were essentially to continue to put gas through that pipeline via Ukraine. She wanted that extended beyond 2026. I asked him about that. He pushed back and said, listen, it's an old pipeline. There are problems, it needs to be repaired. He was seemingly suggesting that it wasn't a safe operation and that it would be safer to use the new pipeline. Is all of that false?
This is just a lie. It's a safe pipeline. It can
no leaks.
Pump, no leaks. It can pump a lot of Russian gas into Europe. Russia, we did not have any major disaster or any major problem with this gas pipeline for decades. They only exist in the mind of President Putin. Ukraine has the biggest gas storage in Europe. So it's not only about pipeline, it's about entire infrastructure. But when we see the policy of Russia, it's very clear. It has been very consistent for more than 10 years. Bypass Ukraine by all means. And this implies building new pipelines, but also imposing on countries who receive gas through Ukraine new gas contracts, which change the route of the Russian supply, like it recently happened with Hungary. The most recent contract that Hungary signed with Russia is excluding Ukraine from the supply model. And this was imposed by Russia. This was Russian demand. So they're not doing it because we have a bad infrastructure. They're doing it because they understand that as long as this energy infrastructure is functional and is in place, first, Ukraine makes money on it. Second, Ukraine has a value for Europeans. I'm sorry for sounding maybe cynical, but Ukraine has value for Europeans in terms of energy supply. And third, the existence of this infrastructure limits Putin's military operations in Ukraine, because if his missile or shell falls on that infrastructure and destroys the supply into the European Union, that is something that Putin cannot allow him, because he always cared for one thing, for his reputation as a reliable supplier of gas to Europe. That has always been his benchmark. Whatever, I can be a mean guy, I can kill, I can do cyber attacks, I can do disinformation campaigns, I can arrange extrajudicial killings and attack other countries, but I'm a reliable supplier of gas and oil, and you need me for that. That's basically the bottom line of his reputation.
Do you think the events of the last few months have disproved that?
Yes, because basically this is a handmade crisis with the aimed at one thing, to certify Nordstrom II and to put additional, and he's saying we can continue to supply, we can supply even more, but Ukraine should be excluded.
Would the certification of Nordstrom II, within the current context, the current environment politically, in your view, endanger Ukraine as a sovereign state?
Yes, as I said, I think it's one thing is the Ukrainian interest in this whole cause, but it's not only Ukraine that is opposing Nord Stream 2. Central European countries are not happy with the Nord Stream 2, and they're vocal about it. Some Western European countries are also very unhappy with Nord Stream 2, but they're not vocal about it because they do not want to come at odds with Germany on this.
Yeah.
This is a bad project from all perspectives, and we never shied away from saying it publicly.
Before I let you go, there's a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers that just visited Ukraine. They came back to the States and were quite vocal about the need for the U.S. to do more to support your country, given what you're facing potentially. What is it that you would like to say directly to the American public about what Ukraine needs today? Because according to your intelligence, there could be an incursion as early as late January.
Ukraine is a democratic country that wants one thing, to have the right to decide its own destiny. The destiny of Ukraine should be decided in Kiev, not in Moscow. Ukraine is a country that is fighting for itself, is not asking anyone else to fight for us. And I think it's a beautiful country to support. It's worth supporting us.
And part of that support would be U.S. economic sanctions.
U.S. economic sanctions, U.S. military equipment, and U.S. intelligence.
Your Excellency, thank you for joining CNBC.
Thank you.